Good evening and welcome to the channel. I'm Brian. Thank you for joining me today. We have got tonight's update on the Ukraine war. I do apologize for it going this late. It turns out that there was a presidential debate here in the U.S. last night, or just in the last little bit here. I had to watch it and see what came out of it to see what I felt about it. But that's not for tonight's video. Let's go ahead and get started on Ukraine. By the way, if you are just joining in, absolutely chime in. Let me know that you're here, and let me know if you have any questions or anything else like that. I'll see what I can find out for you. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with the ISW's assessment of the campaign on January 9th. And they went through a lot of good stuff here, so I'm going to try and review it as quick as I can. A Ukrainian public opinion survey on Ukrainian attitudes towards the Ukrainian government and military indicates that Ukrainian society overwhelmingly supports Ukraine's military and its leadership, while experiencing the tensions typical in a society fighting an existential defensive war. This is a lot from the polling that we saw just recently in the last video. So they're generally pretty much optimistic, at least at this point in time. There are going to be more pressures from the ongoing war here that are going to tell on the populace overall. But still, it seems that they're maintaining their upbeat attitude towards their leadership and the way the war is being carried out. The opposite seems to be going on over in, well, not exactly opposite, but other things are going on over in Russia, according to a University of Chicago's National Opinion Research Center poll. President Putin still has strong domestic support for his regime and his war in Ukraine, despite the relatively poor economic conditions and living standards. That would be 63% are supporting the war in Ukraine, and 64% see this as a civilizational struggle between Russia and the West. This is Russia saying that they are the victim of Western aggression, that the West is always out to get them. And I've mentioned this before, I'm going to say it again here. For effectively from 1994-ish to about 2014, I really didn't think about Russia at all. There was no existential threat from Russia during those years, from my perspective, that I wasn't paying that close of attention at the time. It's there is no threat from the West to Russia when Russia is playing nice on the world stage, when Russia isn't invading anybody else. So this really tells us, though, that Vladimir Putin is pitching this war as a civilizational struggle between Russia and the West. And that's the reason why it's playing this way, ever the victim of Western policies. There's been a lot of vitriol towards gender integration in Ukraine's military. From the Russian side, the Russians are pretty much going for the traditional gender roles, and this is showing a real gap between how much Russia can mobilize their society compared to Ukraine, who, admittedly with a much smaller population, has a greater pool, at least percentage-wise, that they can mobilize into the military. It's not going to make it easy for Ukraine, but just be advised. There is a shortage of anti-aircraft guided missiles after the recent rounds of attacks. And we've kind of seen some of that in the most recent set of actions that have been coming through. It's clear that, at least to a certain extent, Russia is now able to sneak at least some of their missiles through that they couldn't before. And that's because Ukraine is running out of those interceptor missiles. They're prioritizing the biggest threats the best they can. That said, Russian sources continue to complain about persistent command and communication problems that degrade Russia's combat capability over near Krinky. This is an ongoing issue, and I believe I've got some more on this later. There are also Russian sources calling for another large-scale Russian offensive operation in Kharkiv to create a buffer zone. Now, the last word I had is that there's about 19,000 Russian soldiers all along that northern border there. There's been no indications that they've been increasing that number according to the last information I had available. That said, the idea that Russia is trying to do is to create a buffer zone of about 15 kilometers to prevent the Ukrainians from being any closer to Russians' borders, which, considering Ukraine wasn't attacking Russia's borders before the war, it seems like this is just one more reason to take more territory. That simple. The Russian and Kremlin rhetoric has been aimed towards Moldova a lot lately, and this appears to have emboldened the pro-Russian separatist leaders in that country. They're really trying to break up Moldova. That would destabilize a country right on Ukraine's southwestern flank, and that would give the Russians a lot more flexibility with what they could do with those troops there, possibly even take over the country. It's a tough situation over there in Moldova. And that's kind of what Institute for the Study of War has said about it. Now let's talk about Krinky for just a little bit here. The Russians are saying that there's been tremendous failures. They mentioned it in that Institute for the Study of War bit about the communications failures that are causing problems. And the Kyiv Post has put in a really good article on this right here. In fact, let me see. I don't have everything set up right now to put things onto the screen neatly, but let me see if I can do something real fast here. Not at the moment, but let's see if I can just do this here real fast. And bear with me just a second here. If you want to see the link that I'm talking about right now, it's going to be, where'd it go? Dang it. Let's see. Let's try moving this over here. No. Okay, I can't do it right now. I was going to show you the link, but I'll try and put it in the fact is, I'll just put it in the comments. That's an easy way to do it. So bear with me a second here. Boop. Excellent. I'll keep that in mind for the future. Let's go ahead and get back to what we were doing here on this one. Okay, so military blogger, this would be Rybar, has been talking about the situation around Krinky. It's been a real problem for Russia lately. In some cases, the situation is getting absolutely worse. Air defenses are in the category of cry on each other's shoulders, he says. For the last 6 months on the level of a nation state, we've been trying to solve the problems of repelling attacks by drone swarms, missiles, and rocket artillery. There is equipment and resources for the Russian military to do this, but for some reason their commitment isn't possible because of various bureaucratic idiocies. Now, a lot of that is because, according to them, here's a story right here. On January 6th, they saw a target that came across on the right bank of the Dnieper River, a bunch of armored personnel carriers that the Ukrainians were driving, some self-propelled artillery, and a couple of tanks. But it took hours to coordinate the fire mission to try and attack that target. And by then, those targets were gone. He also said, you can jam the front line with all kinds of weapons and systems as much as you want, but it is more difficult to deal with the rigid thinking of decision makers. Our weakest point is the human factor. So this is the situation here. It looks like they might be working to throw Teplinsky under the bus and accuse him of not dealing with all the problems, considering that all these problems existed before this ever took place, before the beginning of before Teplinsky even arrived here. That tells me that they were just looking to scapegoat somebody, not actually resolve the issue. That's a very Russian thing to do. All right, let's move on to the news out of Ukraine. And I'm pulling this one over to the news out of Ukraine section because it's interesting. The President Zelensky had a visit over in Lithuania, and it turns out that Lithuania is going to be providing a big chunk of support for Ukraine in this war here. But Vladimir Zelensky, man, I can't talk today. Vladimir Zelensky stated that Putin won't end the war until we all together end him. He won't stop until he destroys Ukraine. And if Ukraine doesn't defeat Russia, then Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Moldova might be next. He also stated that this year will be decisive for Ukraine, Lithuania, and their partners. And the thing is that Russia has been very clear about their intentions here. There's not the only way you could even say there's any question about Russia's intentions is if you have paid zero attention to everything going on. And that is the problem, is that Russia tells you what they intend to do. And for some reason, the West just doesn't believe them. Ukraine is going to launch 5 joint ventures with Western arms companies in 2024. That would be according to the economy minister. President Zelensky has called for more modern air defense systems. As we already mentioned, they're running low on those air defense missiles. They need more of them. They don't have the ability to produce them, so they need them desperately to be provided by Western partners so that they can defend their skies. The Rustem Umerov and his commanders have visited the Eastern Front here. That'll be Zaluzhny and Rustem Umerov. They went over there and they're making some real visits. They're actually getting closer to the front lines. In this case, they're over in the Chernihiv Oblast, which is next to Russia, though not directly near the absolute front lines. That said, those oblasts over there are constantly getting a little bit of bombardments from Russia, and they're constantly responding in kind. So it's not exactly on the front lines, but it might as well be. They're getting out there, they're seeing what the situation is on the ground. They're being the leaders that Ukraine needs. The energy minister of Ukraine has reported that Russian forces have fired on repair workers twice over the past 2 days. This is workers repairing energy infrastructure in Kharkiv Oblast, and they were fired on by those Russian forces, though thankfully none of the workers were injured. Ukraine constantly seems to be very pleased with the Bradley fighting vehicle. This thing has been way punching above its weight class in its ability to deal with problems on the battlefield. Between its 25mm Bushmaster cannon or its TOW missiles, it can deal with nearly anything it could possibly come across on the battlefield. And you can throw a squad of heavily armed boys in the back. What more could you ask for? Also, typically, when a Bradley does get hit, it may be penetrated, but most often, the crew and the passengers walk away. So they're very pleased with the Bradley fighting vehicle. This is more information on the visit that Zaluzhny and Rustem Umerov made to the front lines in some of these areas. And you can see some of the video of them talking here. The pressures on the soldiers are that they need to continue repelling enemy attacks and inflicting significant losses on the Russians, because the Russians can focus their forces where they're going to attack, whereas Ukraine has to defend pretty much everywhere. And I'm going to link this one in the comments as well. It's too much information to truly review here, but this Twitter thread discusses the Donbas Line, which is a series of defenses that Ukraine has put together on the Eastern Front over here to protect against Russian aggression. And they're multi-layered. They're very defensive depth in spades. And it's very good. Huge trench works. Usually you think of the Surovikin line that the Russians built. Ukraine has been doing much the same thing in order to provide defensive structures for their soldiers to fight in. And that's everything out of Ukraine. I'm going to go ahead and pause for just a moment. If you have any questions, let me know. Over here where I live, we've gotten about 6 to 8 inches of snow, depending on exactly where you stand in the yard, and we're expecting even more this weekend. Nothing like what they're dealing with in Ukraine. We just got a thick layer of the white stuff. We're expecting the subarctic temperatures next week. All right, moving on to the news out of Russia, and we've got a lot of things to review here on that. According to the Defense Intelligence Update for the UK, they're talking about the accidental discharges of aerial munitions that happened over Russian-controlled territory. I'm just going to skip through the summary of the events and go straight to the conclusion. Russia's continued propensity for munition accidents is likely exacerbated by inadequate training and crew fatigue, leading to poor execution of tactics during missions. That's the overall situation in Russia. They may have more bodies, but they don't have more ways to train them and make them effective soldiers. Mentioned in the previous video that Russia has started evacuating children from Belgorod following the recent spate of drone attacks that have gone over the area. And of course, as always, it's the Russian air defenses that have been falling on Belgorod, not the Ukrainian drones. So 93 children have been evacuated from Belgorod, after, the oblast, as I understand it. No, the city of Belgorod, after these attacks, according to the Belgorod Oblast governor. A little bit of a taste of the war coming home to roost. Russia's begun production of a new glide bomb, and I've got some additional information on it. Where did I put that? Oh, right here. Okay, perfect. The DREL, or DREL, new glide bomb. I think DREL is the actual pronunciation. And the Kiev Post has put in some information on this new cluster munition, this new glide bomb, I should say. I'm going to just go straight to the technical information here. It's a GPS or GLONASS guided cluster glide bomb. Originally, it was showcased in 2017 and has been claimed to have been operationally functional since April of 2018, though no evidence of it being used has been put out there. It does have an integrated friend or foe system and is supposed to minimize the damage of a strike against their own forces. And it's also supposed to be able to carry an electronic countermeasures pack to make it resistant to jamming and radar detection. They claim it's literally unable to be seen on radar, and to be honest, I would rather see it. I would like to see it before I'm going to believe that. It can be dropped from a maximum altitude of 14 kilometers, giving it a range of between 30 to 50 kilometers. They do have different types of payloads that they can put on it, including an anti-vehicle and material submunitions, though right now it sounds like they're going to be using it as a cluster bomb. So overall, that's what they're trying to deploy. They say they've gone into actual mass production. We'll have to see if that's actually true. As of this morning, drones allegedly attacked the Russian military airfield Engels 2 in the Saratov region. This is the airport that their big bombers always take off from, bringing over the air-launched cruise missiles and things like that. There was no report as of this recording as to exactly what may or may not have been hit, or whether the actual region itself, the actual airport itself, was hit. Russia continues to want to interfere with the U.S. election. I think that's obvious. That even if they can't get a specific candidate elected, just creating the chaos of questions about the election is enough for what they need to do. They're just trying to sow discord in the United States. Russian government resources are now advertising tours to North Korea. They call it one of the most interesting and mysterious countries in the world. I don't know about you, but I don't think I'd be exactly excited to tour North Korea at this point in time. Over in Oriel, we do have some final information on the actual damages carried out by the drone attack on an oil plant over there. There's also a warehouse of a bridge repair plant that was damaged and a workshop. They also managed to hit a tank with diesel fuel at the Orelnefteprodukt oil depot, and there was a fuel spill on site. And they also hit the Stroymagistral LLC warehouse in the village of Uchebny and that was destroyed with road equipment stored inside, etc. Hi, Kazman. Glad to see you this evening. Thank you for joining me. I'm still doing pretty good, and it's been a busy day today. Just came off of watching the presidential debate, the Republican presidential debate that they did in Iowa today between Haley and DeSantis. And that's why today's stream is later than expected. But I'm doing good. It's been busy. Up to my shins in snow at times. So overall, this attack apparently was really successful, and it looks like that's a positive from Ukraine's perspective. Here's a photo of some of that. Behind the Baza logo, you'll see a tower that's knocked over on its side. Hi, Lucille. Glad to have you on board as well. We're early enough in this, you're not going to miss a whole lot at this point in time. So thank you, but you can definitely go back later and catch the beginning. There were 2 attacks by drones on this oil depot in Orel, and this is some of the damage that was done. It looks like I said, it was a very successful drone strike. In Russia, according to Crimean Wind, volunteers are going to all the junkyards and landfills, and they're getting all of the Japanese-made bolts out of cars and equipment, and they are taking those and giving them to the government. And that's because Russian-made ones suck. That's right. Even though the sanctions are less than 5 years old, now Russia cannot produce a good bolt that won't shear off or otherwise fail. As they say, store-bought spare parts come off, burst, and are not suitable for repairing equipment. So even if Russia is basically putting all their good stuff. Hi, Jerry. Glad to have you here as well. Thank you for joining me, both of you. And I happen to know that you both watched the presidential debate as well. So thank you for the conversation we had on it. So this is the effects of sanctions on Russia. They can't even build a good bolt. Of course, when you're intending for your thing to blow up when it gets there, like a bomb, you don't need the bolts to last except for once. Russia continues to use North Korean missiles to attack Ukraine. Iran is now getting into the game as well, and they may transfer ballistic missiles with a range of up to 700 kilometers. This man is something else. He went to Red Square and started shouting, "Glory to Ukraine." He did it repeatedly, saying Ukraine will win, until he was finally arrested. I actually wonder if maybe he was homeless and needed a place to stay for the night, and that's the fastest way to end up in a prison cell in a hurry. Still, interesting to see, and maybe the Russian population is beginning to open their eyes a bit more. Russia may have an economy based on the sale of oil and hydrocarbons, but this is a lineup at a gas station waiting to get some fuel for their cars. There's one of the few gas stations with fuel today. A lot of the reason for that from the other research I've seen is that they can sell processed petroleum products, fuel, diesel, etc., on the open market for far more than they can sell it on the domestic market. So every drop that they can produce that doesn't have to go to a Russian gas station gets shipped overseas for the maximum available profit to Russia. And this is just your 1984 moment of the day. Russian occupiers in Berdyansk, Ukraine are now going door to door searching homes for contraband Ukrainian literature. Anything written in Ukrainian is being confiscated and removed from their houses. Obviously, they believe that just having a language other than Russian is justification enough to deny them their human rights. This is where I mentioned this earlier in the video, but I'm going to mention it again here. Out of the POWs that were exchanged between Ukraine and Russia, the ones that Russia requested were mainly former prisoners who had gone to war in exchange for amnesty. I'm betting those men go straight back to the front lines. They're already prisoners. They already have those prison sentences against them, but so they're going straight back to where they came from, and that is the front lines. According to Ukraine's GUR, the Vadym Skibitsky, 462,000 Russians are now fighting against Ukraine, with their units near at 95% manned. Now, a lot of that's from consolidation of units and stuff like that. A lot of these are new soldiers that are rotated in, but this will allow Russia to rotate some of their troops and be able to avoid a new wave of mobilization. So that's good news for the Russians, although it's been already made clear that none of those soldiers will be allowed to go home, none of those mobilized Russians, until the end of the war and when Vladimir Putin finally gives his go-ahead that, yes, they can be released from immediate service. Now let's move on to a follow-up on a previous story, and that is the lack of heating in several subdivisions of Moscow. That has expanded. Residents of Khimki near Moscow were left without heating and hot water due to an accident at the boiler house. A lot of these facilities have centralized heating that's coming from a centralized boiler. They send hot water through the pipes that then circulates through the buildings. So if you lose that centralized boiler system, you lose heat throughout multiple houses. And of course, when you lose heat, that means the water in the pipes freezes, bursts the pipes, flooding the houses, and creating a lot of the pictures that we've been seeing. Of course, Russia handles this as Russia handles everything. It's not sufficient to actually go out and be effective at carrying out the resolution to the problem. Now they arrested the head of the district. The court arrested the deputy head of Podolsk, Roman Ryazantsev, for 2 months in the case of the heating main break. Because of this incident, at least 176 residential buildings were left without heating for a long time in Podolsk. Also today, the head of the boiler room of Klimovsky Specialized Cartridge Plant, Alexander Chikov, was arrested. This is according to MASH. As the publication notes, at the moment in Podolsk, 30 residential buildings are still without heating. And this all seems to have started around the new year. And it's been expanding since then. So they've got people in Podolsk, Krasnogorsk, Solnechnogorsk, and Khimki that are all lacking in heat. So it's spreading. Interestingly enough, the failed heating plant, boiler plant, has a lot of weird ties. Turns out that there's actually ties to the military, I believe it was hold on, let me see if I can get it here. This is part of the secret enterprise of Komolsky Specialized Cartridge Plant. And it turns out there's a Mexican connection. There's connection to the State Arms Corporation Rostec, which is run by one of Putin's close buddies. And of course, Mexican authorities, which I just mentioned. And the plant's management included Putin's former security guard as well. So this is probably a story of corruption that has gone horribly awry over in Russia. Okay, I don't know how this ended up here, but let me move it to the end and then go through the rest here. Oops, I forgot to translate a few things. More people that are without heat, this time in Elektrostal. They're literally making bonfires in order to be able to stay warm. Let's see if I can get a picture of the bonfire here. There we go. And wherever they can, they're building huge bonfires so they'll stay warm in this winter. I don't know how they'd be able to sleep at night with that. In Vladivostok, 3,000 residents left without heating due to an accident in the heating network, where the water flooded the yard and froze, with cars actually frozen to the ice, according to The Insider. Hang on, gotta mute this. And Yekaterinburg, Heat lost in hundreds of houses when the temperatures were negative 19, and I'm sure that is Celsius, not Fahrenheit. An electricity outage in Omsk, Russia. Over half of the city has no electricity. And that's there was an accident at the substation that caused that problem. Now there's Russians without heat again. No electricity, no heat, but still they support Putin. Residents of a house in the village of Novozadovsky say they are being killed by the cold. It's freezing outside, and the temperature inside their apartments is around plus 4C, which would be about 34 degrees, 35 degrees Fahrenheit. They've already asked for help from the local authorities with no help. There are no hostilities, but we live like in besieged Leningrad, they said. And that's the situation on the heat in Moscow. Of course, Vladimir Putin, or maybe one of his doubles, went to a greenhouse and planting area where he could touch cucumbers and smell basil. This is a very much, you can tell when somebody is out of touch with what's going on in their country. When people are freezing and he's standing around basically manhandling fresh vegetables in a nice warm place. And we'll end off the Russia section with a comment about this. The State Duma has called women's request to return those mobilized from the war. It's bovine excrement, basically. No one will be returned home. There is no need to dismiss anyone. Today, no, this is all being thrown around. This is being thrown around by our enemies. No need to listen to them. After all, who was called? Citizens of the Russian Federation liable for military service were called up. Every citizen of the Russian Federation liable for military service must be ready at any time at the behest of the motherland to come and carry out the task. Women in Russia have been calling for their husbands who've been mobilized for a long time to be returned home. And Russia is saying no, outright. And often they're actually finding the men who are married to those women and sending them to the front lines to get killed. Lucille states maybe they don't support Putin so much. They're just trying to survive. Always a possibility. And that is always a question. Now I'm ready to move on to the front lines at this point in time. I'm going to kind of close a few things out here so we can get there. All right. The only real major change here is Novomikhailivka. No, sorry, that's Novomikhailivka. There we go. And that means that the Russians have managed to basically add a little bit of territory over here on the left. So that's all that was right there. Again, it looks like it's a tree line and open territory. Ukraine just the other day managed to take this section right here. There's a little sort of high spot right here, but there's no real tactical area right here that is significantly higher than any other area. So overall, it's back and forth. There's also this random assault happening over here just outside of Marinka, where there's not enough of a change here to even see. Let me get right in here. We'll do that one more time so you can see. Basically, they just expanded the gray zone just a little bit. Russia's just attacking in various places. It's that simple. As far as the rest of everything else goes, there's been no change in the overall lines of control. Kupiansk, you can see there's been no changes. Bakhmut and Klishchiivka has settled down for the last few days. No changes there. There is some word that Verbova has been adjusting a little bit here, and I'll get into that in a little bit. Mostly, it looks like it's just a report that there might be more Russian forces kind of over here in this area northwest of Verbova than were originally reported, and they may have a little kind of a spur out in here in this area. And no changes to the lines in Krinky, just more lost Russian equipment. War Gonzo has confirmed basically the lack of changes to the front lines. They do report that Ukrainian forces are overall holding their positions with no real changes besides intensive fighting going on. I'm bringing this one up because it's just an indication that Russia doesn't tell us what's actually going on when there's been an attack on their territory. Today in Sevastopol, Russian soldiers who died at the command post in Yekaterinbalka are buried. According to our sources, most of the dead were from suffocation as a result of inhaling the products of burning electrical wiring. That was as a result of a missile hitting the bunker entrance, which collapsed the bunker entrance and blocked all those men inside. What a horrible way to go. Some of the survivors did manage to escape through the ventilation. A guy my size wouldn't escape through any ventilation, no matter how big it was. Overall, there were reported at least 13 dead. And Russia's claimed that they have stopped all those attacks in that region with no consequences at all. As of a few hours ago, explosions reported in occupied Berdyansk with air defense reportedly active. Russian channels are reporting drone activity. I don't have a good bit of information on exactly what was hit so far. Some more details here on Novomikhailivka. You can see right here on the Null Reports report, they show a slightly different situation in the area than the other map does. However, they are saying that they have pushed back the Russians a significant distance just south of the village. Here's that little bit of information over near Verbova that shows the Russians may have a little bit more jutting out from that area. This map does show that the Ukrainians are farther east than the other map does, though. So keep that in mind when you're comparing these maps. And there's been reports that the fighting has really resumed in the Novoprokopivka and Verbova areas. So that section had kind of gotten a little quiet. There were a couple of exchanges of territory for a bit. Now it looks like Russia's refocused their actions in the area and are now actively trying to start things up again. And that's the situation on the front lines. That does mean that I managed to skip over international, so I do apologize for that. Let's go through the international news. According to Terry Breton, the EU can still meet its target of producing 1 million artillery shells for delivery to Ukraine by spring 2024. And they report that that's if they reprioritize just the European Union, not foreign orders for artillery, and go flat out and expand their operations in making artillery shells. Still possible. Don't know that it'll happen, but still possible. The EU ambassadors have given a partial green light today to start negotiations on the 50 billion euro aid package for Ukraine. They're expected they'll give the full go-ahead over on the EU summit, and so far, Orban isn't blocking this attempt. If he's going to block it, he's going to block it at the last second to make it the most disruptive that he can and try to negotiate something out of it. But there's more on Orban coming up that we want to talk about. Negotiations between the presidents of Ukraine and Lithuania began in Vilnius. NATO members are pledging further support for Ukraine in 2024 and outlining plans for billions in aid, including F-16 fighters. And the NATO Secretary General said, "We will continue to stand by the brave Ukrainians as they push back against Russia's war of aggression." A lot of things going on here, and we'll keep on going. Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico has broadly criticized the West's approach towards the Russia-Ukraine war, saying that Russia needs security guarantees. Strangely enough, if Russia hadn't been attacking people, they wouldn't need security guarantees. Simple enough. Italy's parliament has backed prolonging military support for Ukraine. Italy's been kind of the surprise factor in a lot of this war. They have been surprisingly supportive of Ukraine, and going above and beyond in providing some of that assistance. It doesn't hit the headlines a lot, but when it does, they've done something really significant for Italy. Lithuania pledged $220 million worth of support in a 3-year support package. And they don't mention exactly what. Okay, here it is. In January, we'll again send ammunition, generators, detonation systems, and in February, M577 armored personnel carriers. That's the type of support they're providing. The UK is saying, as their foreign secretary is saying, that support for Ukraine will continue for years and is not controversial in the UK as compared to the United States. And they are saying that they are ready to help for many years to come. Then there's the sternly worded letter. The United States and their allies have condemned North Korea's alleged ballistic missile transfers to Ukraine. That's 50 countries that have signed on to a letter condemning this transfer and calling for an immediate end to delivery of the weapons. That's a sternly worded letter. They're not going to back it up with any military action. Not that I can tell. We mentioned in a previous video that there was a city in Italy where a pro-Russian group was going to do a whole shtick about the rebirth of Mariupol. And this is a pure Russian propaganda event overall. That city has now revoked that permit, and they will not allow that event to take place. Ukraine's anti-corruption agency has added Subway sandwiches and Subway, the corporation, to their list of international war sponsors. Subway still maintains over 500 restaurants in Russia that pay thousands of dollars in taxes to the Russian budget. Iran has not let their drone production, basically lay fallow there. They're now making a new kamikaze drone, the Shahed 107, which will have a range of up to 1,500 kilometers. There's also been reports that Russia started launching Shahed variant-style drones with jet engines in them instead of just propeller engines, giving them more speed and more options for what they can do. More information on Zelensky's visit with Lithuania. Finland has been extending the closure of their they may extend the closure of their checkpoints on the border with Russia. They're, in fact, as far as I can tell, they're saying nothing has changed in the Russian Federation. Finland will not open the border if there are clear signs or threats that Russia will immediately resume its operation, which is trying to flood Finland with deliberate migrants going to their border. The German Bild paper has actually reported that Putin's winter offensive has failed. Russia is still far from capturing Kupiansk and Kharkiv region and Avdiivka and Donetsk region. The results include thousands of dead Russian soldiers and more than 400 units of destroyed military equipment. We talk a lot about the failed Ukrainian offensive. How often do we really talk about the failed Russian offensive? That is definitely not accomplished even as much as Ukraine's failed offensive. After all, Ukraine's offensive resulted in Russia being driven from the Black Sea, the reopening of the Black Sea corridor, and Crimea being under effective fire control from Ukrainian drones and missiles. Ukraine's defense minister, Rustem Umerov, held a video call with Brazil's defense minister. They're talking about increasing the mutual cooperation and development of defense tech and innovations. Brazil has actually got a surprisingly robust defense industry. Not only do they have, is it Embraer? I think it is, an airplane manufacturer down there. They also have some of their own unique variants of tanks that they build themselves and other various things. They've got an interesting defense industry down there. It'll be interesting to see if anything comes out of this particular type of a partnership. That said, Brazil is part of BRICS, the economic zone between Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. So I don't know. This could be a little bit of hedging their bets. Don't know. There have been rallies going on in Washington, D.C. Jason J. Smart, I believe, has been actually in D.C. this week, and they've been putting a lot of hours into basically picketing outside of the Capitol building, so that calling for what Ukraine needs to actually win the war. From Jay in Kyiv, while the U.S. removes itself from the world stage, lost in infighting under a deluge of Russian disinformation, Europe is forced to compensate with Lithuania handing over another 200 million euros in military aid packages. Europe is stepping up to the plate. It's their butts on the line. And they know if Ukraine falls, it's going to be flat out, full on, everything flying warfare. It will not be pretty. Spain is giving Ukraine some modernized medical armored vehicles. They'll be sent to Ukraine for patient evacuation. President Zelensky, while he was in Lithuania, gave a few speeches and said, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Moldova may be next, and it is certain if we do not withstand. We have heard recently that they have started talking about Finland. They have started talking about the independence of Uzbekistan and so on. Putin will not finish this until we collectively finish him. And that's the truth there. The Russians have been making it clear by their actions, their words, and their intentions. They've been telling us all along that their intention is to create a new Ruski Mir with maps that show Russia stretching all the way through Europe and over into Alaska and farther south. The only way it doesn't stretch farther is north because they've already got all of the north they can get. So Russia is intending to carry out this war of aggression further, farther, more places. Even if they have to stop for a few minutes and maybe sign a peace agreement, they'll be back. Edward Hunter Christ is a senior research fellow and a part of the Belgian Royal Military Academy and a former NATO official. That's so you know who we're talking about here. He predicts that Vladimir Putin will throw everything he has at the 2024 election campaign in the United States. Billions of dollars, hundreds of witting agents, many more unwitting ones. The main focus, as always, will not be cybersecurity or hacking, but political subversion using mainly human agents of influence and masses of useful idiots, boosted massively online by large troll factories and vast bot formations. They literally have. Why should they even bother to do the worst things, which is, hacking into systems and things like that? They can cause far more damage by getting into the brains of people through social media and those aspects. I've been watching this situation for the last year and a half, 2 years, and on social media, and it's true. It's clear when the Russian disinformation is going thick and hard to try and silence voices that are against them, to try and overcome any possible dialogue that could happen. And so that is how they're going to try and disrupt things in the United States. And as far as the international stuff, I'm going to end off with this one, which has no additional information at this time. A firearms incident occurred near the Transnistrian-Ukrainian border on January 7th. 2 citizens have been taken to Ukraine, according to the Ministry of State Security of that unrecognized republic. No details on what happened. No reports on exactly who or what or why. It sounds like a provocation. And I'm trying to piece together exactly what Russia would get out of this. Is this a attempt to create a casus belli to go back into Transnistria and expand into Moldova? Is this just an agitation? What is this? I want to know more. But I wanted to pass it on while I had it. And according to Lucille, that's the bottom line. Russian plans to take it all as fast as they can. Absolutely. That is the long and the short of it. They don't intend to stop. If they could have already steamrolled Ukraine, they would already be well into Moldova. And that's just it, is that there's nothing stopping them unless we, the West, hard stop and say this far, it's already too far. and push them right back to the Russian border. Let's move on to the interesting extras for today. By the way, thank you for joining me. Those that are here, absolutely leave me a message in the comments here. I am watching for them. I do appreciate you guys being here, and I do read them. This is not, onto the interesting extras here, this is not even related to the Ukraine war directly. This is a Royal Navy warship, the HMS Diamond, that has been in the Red Sea. And I swear this looks just like something right out of World War II. Now, this is a missile launching off the deck. It's one of their air defense missiles that took out a drone or a missile. I'm not sure. They reported the successful destruction of 7 incoming drone attacks. And it's just amazing to me. This is the world we're in right now. This is the moment. This is the time where, for lack of a better way to say it, good and evil are now lining up on each side. And one side is attacking the other. And the other side's defending itself. This is the UK defending the neutral shipping that's passing through the Red Sea from Houthi attacks. This is people that are on the side of right in this regard, at least in this metaphor, that are defending against those that are on the side of darkness. According to Howard Buffett, there can be no good deal with a bad guy. That's what he said when he was asked if there could be a deal with Russia on Ukraine. How about this weather over in Ukraine? I didn't know that block heaters looked like that. Yes, that is a good name for it, Lucille. Freedom versus tyranny, and I should keep that in mind for the next time, because that is a much better way to say it. But I thought this block heater of basically a pot on fire underneath the engine was really funny here. It works. It's one way to do it, and I've seen something similar happen before. So good on them for being creative and keeping themselves working in this weather. This one is, let me put it this way. If I was called up to serve my country, I hope I could be like this man right here. His name's Ivan. I am from the village of Oleshnik in Vinogradiv district, Zakarpattia region. I joined the army on March 1st, 2022, despite being 57 years old. I couldn't stay home. My wife assumed I was joking when I mentioned I was heading to the military recruitment office. My call sign is Vushko, or uncle, but the lads just call me Dido, grandpa. If the time comes that I am called on to serve on the lines of freedom versus tyranny, I hope I have the courage to respond as Ivan did here. We've seen the story of 2 young women who have successfully poisoned and killed 49 Russians in Crimea. The Russians are now starting to talk about this. The FSB tried to arrest 2 young Ukrainian women in Crimea who previously killed more than 46 Russian soldiers with poisoned food in Simferopol and Bakhchisari. Everything happened a few days ago. The police received information that 2 girls whose attributes were almost exactly the same as those of the wanted saboteurs were spotted in one of the private houses in Yalta. The information was passed to the FSB and special forces were sent. The saboteurs turned out to be well armed. We did not expect this. And perfectly prepared. Plus, someone may have warned them about our visit. As soon as the special forces arrived to apprehend them, the women fired on the FSB with assault rifles and handguns as they made their getaway. We only managed to fire back a few shots. The women fled the scene in a car. They abandoned the car on the outskirts of Yalta. We don't know where the saboteurs are now, according to Russia's FSB. 3 FSB officers were killed, 2 more wounded, one of them seriously. It is possible that one of the women is wounded, but unlikely to be a serious injury as they fled the scene on their own. Now they're advising their soldiers to not accept food from anybody they don't know. I'll tell you, apparently, if you really want somebody dead, have them tick off a Ukrainian girl. Whew. These girls have been a tremendous asset to the resistance in Crimea. And I hope that they're able to get out alive. Hi, Ruth. Glad to hear from you. Glad to have you here. What plug that Lukashenko has pulled numerous times? I'm not familiar with it. Can you give me any more information so I can look into it real fast? Lukashenko's been doing a bunch of stuff over there in Belarus, including setting up a military village only 40 kilometers from the Ukraine border just recently. That's a new one for that matter. And he seems to be really buddying up to Russia, but in an interesting way. He's actually been trying to. He thinks he's secure enough that he can do a little bit of a teasing remark about Russia at this point in time, saying that they were desperate for his eggs and he sent them over. So there's a lot of things Lukashenko's going through. Let me know what you're talking about. I'll see if I've got more information on it. Ukrainian defenders have captured a mercenary from Somalia near Avdiivka. He surrendered with some Russians. He had a Somali passport and barely understood Russian or Ukrainian. He went to fight for the money. He arrived at the front lines at the end of December and surrendered at the beginning of January. So, I don't know. These people in these really poor countries are looking at the money that Russia is putting in front of them and saying, it's worth the risk. So they sign up and they come. It's just crazy. This video is funny. I'll see if I can see if it'll play real quick. That is a lynx at the top of that pole. This dog chased that lynx up that pole and has been patrolling underneath it since in the village of Rudny and Primoria. Just up on that wooden power line pole. But the lynx had to sit at the top of the pole until people showed up and took the dog away. The lynx finally managed to get down. And doggone it, that is a cute lynx. It really is. And we'll end off with Best Buddies standing for protecting our freedom. I've always said I've been amazed at how much the Ukrainians have shown love to the animals, and even in the middle of war. And I think it's showing that their humanity is still intact, even through the toughest of times and the hardest of fighting. They're not torturing animals. I saw a video, and I hate to even mention this one. I saw a video of Russians who literally tied a mouse spread eagle to a pole and pretended to interrogate it, hitting it and torturing it. And that doesn't mean I like mice. But what kind of person are you if that's how you'll treat an animal? It's one thing to kill them and eat them, but to torture them for a video, for fun, is wrong. Whereas Ukrainians, they take good care of their animals. And I think that speaks well of their souls. And that's everything for today. I'm going to go see if there's anything interesting or new about Lukashenko real quick. This will be as normal. You're going to see kind of the sausage being made if there's anything interesting over there. Lukashenko. Let's see if anything pops up in just a quick search. Let's see. Apparently they did a big shindig over for New Year's. What a performance. Let's see. I don't see anything that's new or jumping out at me. Ruth, I'll be watching for comments. So if you have a little bit more information as to what you might have seen, something I might be able to research and get back in on tomorrow's video, that would be awesome. I will absolutely pursue it as best I can. Otherwise, yeah, this is everything for today. It was a very busy day, both here locally and over there in Ukraine. So I do appreciate you all being here. Thank you for joining me today. Hit me with that old thumbs up if you enjoyed today's video and appreciate this coverage. You have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you on the next stream. And thank you, Ruth. I'll be watching for your message. Good night.